Good evening to our viewers and those that are coming in from different places. We do realize you come from different places. So good morning, good afternoon, and good night. It's always a pity when you end that song midway through. I know people always say you should finish that song off, but then it's quite long. I think the last part is the danceable part. So before we start dancing on air, I think we'll stop it at that. So apologies for stopping it in advance. But thanks for joining us. And this evening, we have Mr. Mwila Crisedi Wanga. I hope I've pronounced those really correctly. And he is the chairperson at Youth Lead Zambia. He is Equally Communications and membership engagement specialist at Africa Philanthropy Network. He is also the Zambia Youth Delegate at the Commonwealth for Youth Council. And lastly, he's founder and director at Be Relevant Africa. So, Mr. Wanga, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to be here today. Thank you so very much, and for that illustrious introduction. And you pronounced my name perfectly correct. Most people always have a problem with it. Most people would say Crisedi, whatever it might be. But I think you did a good job on that. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We're also really excited to have you, and we want to equally get a lot of information from you and get your views. And the topic today is youth and governance. And so if anybody has anything, a question that you'd like to ask him, kindly please send it through on the live, on the comments. I'll see it and we can actually tackle it. But we'll make a start. And I'm hoping that our internet holds off, because I've had issues with the internet through the day. So I do hope that it holds off. On the 1st of June, you submitted a proposal at State House, an address to the president proposing for the establishment of a presidential youth envoy system. So tell us briefly what the youth envoy system is all about.
Thank you. I think even before I can get to that point, I think it's also important to to bring to life that, the need for us to include young people in championing the development agenda of the African continent as well as our country. I think it's something that calls for no debate. I think it's important, taking into consideration that we have established so many policy agreements, either at continental level as well as national level. And one of the things that you come to understand is that it's young people who are at the center of driving the success of some of these policy proclamations. Either we talk about it from a continental perspective of the Agenda 2063, it's the young people that have to drive the success of that particular agenda. When we come to a national point of view, we have the Vision 2030, and recently we just passed the 8th National Development Plan. It's young people that have to be at the center of driving the success of these amazing developmental pronouncements. But one of the things that actually presents itself is the extent to which young people, even though they are commanding the largest population, the largest percentage of Zambia's population, they are the least represented when it comes to governance spaces as well as spaces of leadership representation. So when we proposed before the president a system that we called the Presidential Youth Envoy System, we tried by all means to see how best can we elevate the voices and aspirations of young people in the administrative arm of government, which being the executive in itself. Because when you look at the people that surround the president, we may have a few youthful individuals here and there, but the president does not have explicitly a person that advises him on youth policy direction. We does not have somebody that advises him on youth developmental issues. And I think it's very important for us that we even, sought to propose an idea called the Presidential Youth Envoy System. And the fundamental objective of the Presidential Youth Envoy System is to have a youth arm that is going to be presenting, that is going to be airing out and channeling and raising the voices and action of young people in key governance spaces before the president himself. And how the Presidential Youth Envoy System is supposed to function in two dimensions. So we have the Presidential Youth Envoy himself or herself, and this person is selected through a rigorous selection process. They serve in this position for 2 years, advising the president on key youth policy issues. And underneath the Presidential Youth Envoy, we have the provincial presidential ambassadors who then support the Presidential Youth Envoy in channeling him or her the information that is coming at provincial level. And all these, they serve in a maximum of 2 years, and then that consistently rotates. And they are serving in this position not on a voluntary basis, but they are also paid, as they are trying by all means to raise the voices and action before the executive arm of government. Because every time that the executive arm of government meets to pass policy, we do not have youth representation or somebody that is telling the president on what young people really want and what young people really want to see. So we thought, this might be an amazing idea. And from what we have been able to receive from the powers that be, is that such a proposal came at the right time, and we hope for the best that it can be brought into implementation.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm struggling to hear you a bit in part, but I hope the sound improves as we go along. You equally represented Zambia at the just ended Commonwealth Youth Forum. It was themed Taking Charge of Our Future. And there's loads of questions, I think, when people ask us, is there any point in being part of the Commonwealth as a youth? Probably is what I'll be asking. Oh, you're muted.
So I've removed my headset. Am I better now?
I think that's better. Yes.
This is better, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I think that there are opportunities for young people to be part of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, I believe, has really created a platform through which young people can actually express themselves and support in driving the future of the whole entire Commonwealth region. I've been serving in this position. I think this is my second year now, and this is my last year to serve as the Zambian youth delegate at the Commonwealth Youth Council. And the manner in which you get selected, to be able to serve on the Commonwealth Youth Council. It's not that you apply or anything like that, but the Commonwealth Secretariat, they will send more like, how can I call this? More like a memo to the Ministry of Youth as well as the National Youth Development Council. And then they'll be able to map out young people that have been more active in raising the Zambian flag in various international platforms. So that's how you're able to, you can easily position yourself in order for you to be accorded with such an opportunity. But I, for one, I'll tell you the truth that the Commonwealth is an open space for young people to be able to be appreciated, and the CHOGM, at the recent Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that we had, the whole entire conversation was around young people. And one of the things that President Paul Kagame stated during the business forum at CHOGM is that we need to reach a point where we stop working for young people and we start working with young people. And I think for me, it really drove the conclusion, like we can even end the conference, the forum at this moment in time, because I believe the president has just said what he had to say, because it's high time that we started seeing young people as key players, not only as key players, but as key partners in driving the development agenda, not only for our countries and continents, but for the whole entire global village. So definitely the Commonwealth is an open space for young people to champion their agenda.
All right. And I think a follow-up on your answer is one of the things that has always baffled me, I think, about our African governments is we do not have a system of mentorship or even having people on internship within the government. So I was really interested when I saw your youth envoy system, and I was interested to hear what it was about, because that should equally involve people going in for internships. Deserving youths that probably they've seen, so that then you could actually see a carry on and a handing over of batons. But unfortunately, the African system is one that's very singular. I ran this race on my own and I ain't teaching, the youth. And I think that's why in the last election, the youth were the biggest demographic that were determining, yes. And I think because of that outlook or the look of the, I would think the government would be pro-youth considerate. But as soon as the appointments began coming in, we noticed that there were very few spaces for the youth. In fact, we were trailing slightly above the women. And it's in so many places we find that the youth are trailing and we're not working with the government. We're not beside them. We are sort of, behind and stuff like that. So I'm thinking, that's my personal view, but do you think we have enough youth within our government spaces in governance?
I think it's I think you really don't need rocket science for all of us to be able to see that we are lacking when it comes to youth representation in key governance spaces. And I'll tell you the truth that I think in Southern Africa, if there's a country that's fairly doing well when it comes to youth representation in key governance spaces, is Namibia. Namibia is doing perfectly well because they're trying by all means to see how best they can include young people in key positions of influence and power. One of the youngest ministers we have in the world is from Namibia, only 23 years old. She's the deputy minister of ICT. They have a young lady by the name of Patience Masuwa. She's an amazing member of parliament in Namibia. There are so many young people who have been regarded and considered in order for them to take up the arms of leadership. And like you said, the biggest problem that we've had is a generational gap when it comes to leadership development in our country. I think we did fairly well in the 1960s, where there was this intergenerational kind of blended leadership. We could see people like Rupiah Banda, former President Rupiah Banda, at an early age of 23, he was serving as High Commissioner in Egypt. At an early age of 26, he was serving in high positions in the United States. At an early age of 28, he was in Namibia. So we could see there was this intergenerational kind of leadership that presented itself. Just a few days back, we were celebrating the birthday of Dr. Vernon Mwanga, and I think all of us know that if there's somebody who has a rich political history as a young person, is Dr. Vernon Mwanga. So there was that during the KK regime, where there was an aspect of passing on of leadership to the next crop of young leaders. And even if you look at the modern day leaders we celebrate today, a larger portion of them are a product of Kenneth Kaunda. So I kind of feel like we killed that, you know, in the early 21st century, you know. So I kind of feel like there's need for us to get back on the need for us to pass on this leadership. And I, for one, I'll tell you the truth, I'm pro intergenerational leadership, because I believe we need the wisdom of the elders and the creativity and energy of resilience of in order for us to build this nation. So it's not about having more young people in positions of power. No. It's about having a selected category of young people who have the nation at heart in order for them to drive the development agenda of the African continent as well as our nation. You know, in the next 10 years, we know our president needs to be ensuring that there's that young person that, is being trained in order to take up the arms of power. And maybe to quickly wrap up on this question you've asked me, I've always suggested that political parties need to start looking into themselves in order to start establishing what I love to call political party leadership academies. If we have the UPND Leadership Academy, we have the Patriotic Front Leadership Academy, we have the Socialist Party Leadership Academy. These leadership academies, they help to raise the next crop of young leaders within their political space, as opposed to only limiting the young people to being political party cadres or being, rubber, just stamping, and so on and so forth. So I believe there's a lot that needs to be done in order for us to prepare the current crop of young leaders for the next segment of leadership for our nation.
To an extent, amusingly, I'm not so sad that we don't have these academies, because I think the quality of politician that we've had after the KK regime wasn't, well, I think slightly after the MMD wasn't as good. So I don't think I would want youth, because I look at the nature of the youth that we have. And I for one think that we have actually moved away from actually politics. What we actually do is it's a slavery mentality. I'll give an example of the recent, the musicians from the Kalandanya group who suddenly, jump shift. And that's slavery, because I think as a musician, you are a musician, you're not a politician. You shouldn't even be in the political spaces. You can talk about politics because as a musician, you have a message. But I don't think you should be somebody that is, sweeping up and licking the backsides of politicians, which is what a lot of the youth were forced to do. And that's why we had regalia. That's why boots became so popular. We had people in military wear, because the idea was that as a youth, your place was to sweep or, introduce the politicians. And I think to an extent, we are saved that we didn't have the academies and those leadership. And I think this is a good time to start from scratch, like you've explained, to say, we can start from scratch and create these academies where people are able to learn from these political parties. And you have the choice, because I think as youth, we have different views, different choices, and we can choose which political party you can be aligned to. So I think absolutely. But follow up on that is, what can we do to get as many youth into governance? I think you've talked about the academies, I think, which is really good, but what else can we do?
If you ask me, by nature, the Zambian youth are political by nature. We have this political element in us as young people in this country. They, like, by nature, we are political. But the question we should be asking ourselves is, how are we allocating our political energy? In what direction are we allocating our political energy? Is it just about trying to sway with the political wind as it comes? Is it just about being good on social media? In what direction are we channeling our political energy as young people? And one of the things that I say is that right now the country is at a position where it's easier for you as a young person to realize your political agenda and see how best you can ride with it. I think we are at a time now where it's easier for all of us as young people to begin asking myself, okay, great, if I want to go in the field of governance, which area am I going to drive my agenda? Because one thing that we have to understand is that governance is broad, and governance is not only limited to politics. Under governance, we have an issue of democracy strengthening. Under governance, we have public finance management. Under governance, we have political education. Under governance, we have human rights, freedoms, and liberties. Under governance, we have foreign policy and diplomacy. Under governance, we have policy formulation and public administration and international relations. So there's a whole lot under governance. The question you should be asking yourself as a young person, to the young people that are listening to us right now, is which area of governance do I want to strategically position myself in order for I to become a force to reckon with? Because even when we look at our founding fathers, these were people that were in governance, but they strategically positioned themselves in a particular manner that they became forces to reckon with in certain areas of influence. John Wanakatu told himself, me, I'm going to drive development in the field of education. President Rupia Banda and Vernon Mwanga told themselves, I'm going to champion my agenda in the field of foreign policy and diplomacy. That's why these guys, they served a lot in the diplomatic space. People like Mainza Jona, he told himself, I'm going to drive my agenda in the field of law and ensuring that I build a strong legal system for my country. So I think it's also important that young people begin to not only generalize their participation in the field of governance, but they are able to define their area of relevance and influence in order for them to have more strength and power and be regarded as key players in driving the development agenda of our country and our continent. Because I'll tell you the truth, and I said this when I was given the opportunity to speak during the Summit for Democracy, when I was invited by President Joe Biden. So I was having an engagement with the United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And one of the things that I told him is that young people can do more than just participate in youth-focused conversations. Young people have the potential to contribute to conversations that you think are above them. So bring young people to the table and let them talk about geopolitics. Bring young people to the table and let them talk about rethinking patriotism, culture. Bring young people to the table and let them talk about industrialization and digitalization and innovation. Bring young people to the table and let them talk about climate resilience and environmental preservation. They can do more than just limiting them to a youth-focused conversation. Because the more we give them certain tasks and responsibilities, they begin to have a certain level of power and commitment that indeed the future of my nation and the future of my continent rests in my hands. As in the words of Kwame Nkrumah, I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. But in order to reach that level, you need to have a certain level of patriotism in you as a young person.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we lacking on a lot of fronts is the patriotism element. But I equally my theory is that as youths, we are very, especially Zambia, we are very laid back. And that laid backness, which we call it peace, but I think it's laziness, and it's so ingrained. We are so comfortable in the laziness because maybe we've not had to fight for things. Our fellow friends, I think, let's say in South Africa, are so radical. We have so many youths pushing in so many political spaces, like you've explained all the different political governance areas, that you can actually pinpoint and see where this youth is driving at. Same thing with Namibia. We, on the other hand, are sort of all over the place, and we are just maybe really centralized with just the cadreism element of things. And I always ask myself, how do we get out of this lazy, laissez-faire, comfortable youth in Zambia syndrome? How do we shift that mindset?
And you're right. Zambian youth, we have this laid-back approach to things. You know, we have this. It will work out in some way. You know what I mean? And normally that's what we are doing at my organization, Be Relevant Africa, is that we're trying to provide platforms and opportunities for young people to get more exposed to other spaces beyond Zambia. And that is why we intend to have high-level events where we bring expert speakers. We are planning a big event in December, and we hope to have, former President Barack Obama to give a keynote speech. We're calling it the Young and Relevant Conference to be happening in December. And one of the things that we're trying to do as an organization is to expose young people to different spaces, to expose young people to different realities that they've never seen. Because I think many of us, yourself and myself, we may have a radical approach towards leadership development and doing certain things because of our level of exposure, because we've traveled and we've seen how, you know, young people in Egypt are focused in being patriotic to their country. We've seen how West Africans are so hardworking. We've seen how South Africans are radical when it comes to the political agenda, because we have traveled and we've been exposed. But then how can we also help other young people to have a certain level of exposure that say, hey, guys, look, there are young people your age in other countries who are doing A, B, C, and D. You can also do it only if you're able to position yourself in a particular way and begin to realign your life, you know, in certain dimensions. So I think really what we need are more opportunities for young people to be exposed, you know. And I had an opportunity at the time when I was representing Zambia at the Commonwealth Youth Forum. I had an opportunity to sit with the Permanent Secretary of Youth, Sport and Arts, Mr. Kangwa Chileshi, and we had an engagement. And one of the ideas that I shared with him is the need for us to have more high-level engagements at in other provinces away from Lusaka, because it's becoming very difficult for a youth, you know, in the deepest parts of Muchinga or Western Province, for them to conceptualize on key conversations such as climate change, on big conversations such as geopolitics. We won't understand some of that. But the more we start having more high-level conversations and begin to expose a certain group of young people in other provinces, it becomes easier to have, you know, to be able to bridge the urban and rural youth and bring them together in order for them to think in the very same manner and in the very same direction. I mean, 20 years from now, we may not know where the next president will come from. You know, it might be a youth from Northwestern Province. It might be a youth in the deepest parts of Eastern Province or Western Province. But if these young people don't receive the right kind of exposure, we're going to be repeating the same cycle of bad leadership on and on and on. And one of the things that I always say is that it's better we invest in building the next crop of young leaders. We put in as much money as possible than us beginning to put in so much money and resources in trying to heal the negative repercussions that came as a result of bad leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very disheartening sometimes. I think exposure is a bit of a it's a double-edged sword, because you can see something and you can look at it, but you know you can't even speak because people will not understand where you're coming from. And I think that exposure that you're talking about is so important, and getting as many of the younger generation into, because I think we are so predominantly Lusaka vested. And I think that's one thing that the government probably should work on, is to decongest the whole centrality of businesses and NGOs and stuff like that. And people who are equally investing in the country should try and be, you know, spread out, because I think that opens up as many spaces for the younger people, like you've pointed out. I think follow up on that question. We are in a new government, 9 months into, I think this must be 9 months. I hope I'm 9 or 10 months into this new government. And the onus is on the CDF within the smaller communities, like you say, in the smaller areas. And instead of bringing the youth together, we are saying, can we develop our areas within where we are staying? Okay. I have a view that sometimes when people give you free things very easily, you know, it's not taken as seriously. I think we've seen a bit of this when the CDF has been, you know, is being implemented at this stage. There's so many instances where MPs and councillors are complaining that there's very little youth involvement. And I'm asking myself, is the CDF the right route for a youth? What do you think?
I for one, I'll tell you the truth. CDF is it's a decentralized youth empowerment fund. It's the same thing that we had before. It's just been It's just been removed from the central aspect and taken into the grassroots. There's less the change is minimal. I personally, and I'm not speaking for the majority youth, I speak with my own conviction. I feel what we really need at this moment in time is skills development programming for young people. What we really need at this moment in time is to allocate more resources to change the mindset of young people to begin looking at driving the development of our country in a whole different direction. I'll tell you the truth. Every time I've been given something that is free, I run an organization. When someone just comes and they give me free money, I think even the manner in which I use that money is not properly accounted, you see? And that's where the biggest problem is. And that's why I don't like free things, because there's a certain level of responsibility that you get when, you know, upon acquiring a certain skill and then being given financing to champion an agenda of that skill, and then they tell you this money is not free, you need to work hard and be able to pay it back in good time. It becomes easier for you to actually drive the agenda. Now, look, we are given approximately 100,000 kwacha to young people that have no knowledge about financial management. They have no knowledge about auditing and accounting. They have no knowledge about scaling of projects and programming. They have no knowledge about monitoring and evaluation. They have no knowledge. A larger portion of them are coming from the rural areas. So I think the first thing that we need to do is to first and foremost invest in the enlightenment and in the skills programming of our young people in some of these grassroots spaces, because it becomes then easier for us to commit certain resources to a particular group of individuals, because we know that they've been capacitated in order for them to take up some of these resources they've actually been given out. That's the first thing. Then the second thing that we also need to do with when it comes to our youth empowerment programming is the need for us to establish a central monitoring and evaluation system at provincial level and national level that helps to monitor and evaluate the manner in which CDF resources are being disbursed, the manner in which CDF resources are being utilized, the manner in which CDF resources are driving the impact that we envision. And also strategically, we can ensure that the manner in which the CDF is also being allocated, it's helping us to achieve Vision 2030. So that even the projects that we are funding are helping us to drive ourselves in a particular direction that we want to see. And this is a model that Singapore used in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the 1990s. They strategically allocated resources to ideas and innovations and programs that they wanted to implement for the future of Singapore. When you listen to the first Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, one of the things that he said is that Singapore, we don't have all the resources that most of these other developed countries have. But what we have is human resource. And the best that we can do is to invest in the skills and in the enlightenment of our people. Because when our people are capacitated and when our people are enlightened and when our people are exposed, they're going to be the ones to drive the development we envision without even forcing them. They're going to have that national responsibility. And I, for one, I believe that's the route we need to take as a nation, or else it's, we'll just say that CDF was released and it was given to this number of young people, but we will not be able to point at any company to say that company that is standing is as a result of CDF.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, that the enlightened part and the strategic part, I think, kind of missed the point, because I don't know why I was under the impression that CDF was going to be something that was going to be pro area. So if, let's say, it's in Southern Province, then you already know that you have grown up in, let's say, pasturing or, a farming area. So in that case, you're going to be empowered in that line because that is what you know, right? And I think this is something that we've seen very common in Tanzania, where you find areas where specific tribes or clans. So you find one area, they just farm in plantain. They've farmed plantain for centuries and centuries, and they just need maybe expansion, in which case it makes a lot more sense that money is pumped into that area. And, the children are being trained and brought up in such a manner. So I was under that impression, but when it was explained that it was quite open, which I suppose there's an advantage to it and there's a disadvantage to it, I think, as you've explained. But it's just a pity that as many youths that are supposed to take advantage of the CDF are not even taking advantage of it. I foresee a case where there'll be a lot more of our elderly people in the cooperatives who know what they want and they can, that kind of thing, especially into the farming area. Veering off this topic, one of the things that I've noticed is that we do not have topics in our schools, things like governance. We don't have any topics like, strategic thinking. These are topics that normally shape you as a human being. So you know that when you have a particular type of politician, they are shaped in a particular way. When somebody says they are left wing or they are right wing, or they say they're democratic and socialist, there's a lot of understanding. And it was just sad to see just prior to the elections where you have somebody in UNIP forwarding the UNIP agenda, and within a week they jump into the Socialist Party, and you're thinking you were a lawyer. How did you jump from that type of thinking to that? So I'm thinking going ahead is that what do you think about the education system? Are we being fed the correct information going forward in this rather, because globally the world is just going at a very fast speed, and I feel like we're slightly behind. But I'm equally wondering, do you think our education system is befitting us as youth? Is it feeding us the correct information, or are we just going along?
This is a very interesting question. During the Commonwealth Youth Forum that was hosted in Kigali, so there was this gentleman. So he works, specifically in trying to rethink the future of education for the African continent. And he asked to say, how many in here can safely say that the education they've been exposed to has prepared them for the field of work in the 21st century? No one raised their hand. How many in here can safely say that there's need for us to revisit our education system? Everyone raised their hand. So you find a situation where I was struck because that I thought that was only maybe a problem for Zambia, but it's basically a problem for the Commonwealth as well, and any other young people in Africa. That the education that we have is not preparing young people for the field of work. The education that we have prepares us more to acquire a certain skill that I love to call application letter writing and CV reviewing. Mm-hmm. The largest qualification that you have as a graduate is how to write an application letter and how to consistently review your CV. There's nothing wrong with that. But beyond that, how many skills are we being granted as we pass through the education system? Because when you read the report that was done by the World Economic Forum 2 years ago, they stated that by the year 2030, the jobs that we have in the job market today will not exist because machines would have taken over. And truthfully speaking, that's what we're seeing right now. Machines and applications are literally doing what a personnel was doing a few years ago. And by the year 2030, if we do not capacitate our generation in order for them to acquire skills that are more impactful than machines, it will become very difficult for us to have a generation, or rather a human resource that we can actually look at and depend on. So I feel like there's need that really the curriculum, development is something that has been static for over, I don't know how many years. The world changes, but education never changes. So many things change, but education consistently stays the same. So there are certain skills, that are needed, for us to impart in our people in the 21st century. Skills such as creativity. It's a necessity in the 21st century. The world is gravitating towards creative and innovative young people. And that is why you'll notice that when many people are applying for jobs, they'll be given a particular task to say, okay, so you are in this area and you've been told to maybe come up with a project and they'll give you 3 hours to come up with a small project or a small intervention in order for you to be able to, drive change in a particular intervention. So even the organizations and companies, they want to employ people that have a certain creative and innovative touch towards what it is that they are doing. The second skill that young people need in the 21st century is the ability to communicate. the ability to express their views. And when you talk about communication, communication is so many dimensions. The ability to speak, the ability to write, the ability to explain an idea explicitly in a short space of time. We call that an elevator pitch, which I'm sure you've talked about in some of your writing a couple of times. The other skill that young people need in the 21st century is critical thinking, it's inevitable. Critical thinking. The other thing that I think people also need to now look into is collaboration. Our education system for a very long time has been built on competition for a very long time.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very difficult for many countries in Africa to see collaboration and partnership as a necessity. But one thing that we have to understand, when we go back in time, that should have been 23rd May 1963, if I'm not mistaken. So these comrades, they came together, Senghor of Senegal and Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and they all had divergent views about how do we unite Africa. So we had the Casablanca theory and the Monrovian theory, so on and so forth. But above and beyond, all of them, they stated and they said to say, hey, look, guys, the only way that Africa will become the Africa we envision is when we learn to collaborate and work together in unity. And that's not what we see in our education system. So our education system has been programmed, you need to pass number 1. And the person who passes number 10 is not as intelligent as the person that passes number 1. You need to get the best grades. You need to do that. You need to do this. So even when we are writing our thesis, our dissertation, whatsoever that we do it with an element of competition. But the very moment we now start championing the aspect of collaboration, which has built nations, the Europe, it is what it is because of collaboration. The United States, it is what it is because of collaboration. Asia, the Asian tigers, they are what they are today because of collaboration. We are slagging behind as a continent because we have not taken hold of what collaboration entails. And the last skill that we need to start teaching some of our young people is the element of emotional intelligence, which is basically mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I feel like those are some of the key areas I feel needs to be addressed in our education system, because we are learning things that are definitely not preparing us for the 21st century.
Absolutely. So, dear listeners and viewers, we are interviewing Mr. Mwila Wanga, and we're talking about governance and youth. And to those that are watching us, thank you so much for the stars that you've sent, if you've sent any stars. And to those that are yet to send, thank you so much. And we appreciate them so much. So kindly send us stars, because that's how we keep these shows running. Going ahead, I think one of the tragedies that I've seen in this new generation is a slight lag behind of the male youth. Because I think obviously with the females, we have a lot of push because of the feminism going forward and everything, but we've slightly, the male folk are slightly behind, and it's becoming slightly evident in the West. It's highly evident that they're having a big male crisis, with less numbers staying in schools, less numbers graduating. In Africa, we are still at the point where we slightly have more ladies in schools, and there's a kind of I think there's an equality at the moment, but we can see that there's this slight pushback of the male folk. What do you think about that?
I was
because there's a lot of young men unable to get jobs.
Yeah.
A lot of young men just loitering about.
No, you're right. You're definitely right. That was 2 months ago. I had an opportunity to present a paper that I did exactly on what you've asked me. I was presenting it before the SADC Parliamentary Forum. And one of the things that I said is that in our quest to advance the agenda of promoting, in our quest to advance the girl child agenda, let us not do it at the detriment of the boy child, because the boy child needs our support and our care at the very same level as the girl child requires. So let us ensure that as we are developing these two demographics, we're doing it at the same time and with the same kind of resources and the same kind of attention. I feel like we are slowly but sure moving away from the idea of equality, and we are focusing more on one element, because one of the things that we have actually noticed is that if we don't address this issue, we're now going to start seeing a generation of young men that are not as capable and driven and confident as they have to be in order for them to work in partnership with their female flock. Because that's one thing that I believe is that, you know, we work in partnership with the female flock, and that's what we need to create, you know, in our generation. And that is why, if you have noticed, we have not taken time to really look into men's mental health. And that's why you're seeing so many suicide cases are being committed by men, because there's less programs that are, you know, are being created for the boy child to be able to air out, for the boy child to develop his leadership capacity. There are less opportunities that have been allocated to support the boy child. And I, for one, you know, I keep on advocating for a certain level of equality as regards how we're supporting the boy child and also how we're supporting the girl child. And at Be Relevant, we are strategic about it. So we have the She Relevant program. The She Relevant program is a program that helps to build the next crop of young female leaders. And then we have the He Relevant program that focuses on the boy child. So we're trying by all means to develop these two crop of young leaders at the same point. You know, in October, in March, we had the She Relevant conference. In October, we're going to be having the Men's Mental Health Conference. So we're trying by all means to balance our programming, that as we are impacting the girl child, we're also impacting the boy child. So that we ensure that as we build a cream of relevant young leaders, they are all moving at the very same pace and they're all progressing at the very same level. And I'm sure that most of us saw it, how, you know, most of us who followed the case for Johnny Depp. I think it really showed the extent to which even, you know, the voices of a certain population, of a certain demographic is being reduced, you know. And I think, like you said, in the West, I think it's a little bit, you know, more tense. But I believe we can do better. And I think most of us are beginning to notice, you know, this shift that is currently happening in our society. And I think many organizations are beginning, you know, to allocate resources to see how best they can curb this problem. But I believe it's a collective agenda. You know, government really needs to play a big role, and civil society organization, we also need to play a big role, as well as media, in order to kill certain narratives that have been created in this particular space.
Absolutely. As we wind down, I'm going to end by asking, I think I'd heard you answer this question, but I'll ask you here. What do you think democracy is? I think I'd heard a snippet somewhere. And I thought that this will be the perfect last question, I think, that I could ask.
I think for me, democracy means everything, you know. For me, democracy means the ability for people to coexist as one, regardless where they're coming from. For me, democracy means the ability to see another person, regardless how different they may be from you. You still consider them as your brother and your sister. And I think Zambia, we've done fairly well in championing the One Zambia, One Nation agenda. For me, democracy means being able to champion the aspect of inclusion with everything that we have, seeing women as a key element in driving the development cause of our nation, seeing young people as an important partners in driving the development agenda of our country. For me, democracy means being at the center of driving the change we envision. Are we noticing a problem in climate change? Let us not postpone that problem until it becomes a bigger crisis, so we become a reactive kind of generation. But we need to become more proactive. For me, that's what democracy means. Democracy means being able to identify a problem and understanding that the problems that of our society are inevitable. But as a people with strong democratic societies and a strong fabric of democracy, we have to be the inevitable solution to society's inevitable problems. For me, democracy means respecting human rights and the dignity of all people. For me, democracy means being able to look at each other and tell each other to say, hey, look, today might seem as though it's a challenge, but if we work hard as a collective, we can build a generation of young leaders that become the hope and the prosperity of the African continent. So for me, democracy means everything, because when we think of climate resilience, democracy is the answer. When we think of rule of law, democracy is the answer. When we think of freedom of expression, democracy is the answer. When we think of a free media, an independent press, free democracy is definitely the answer.
Mr. Mwila Wanga, thank you so much. I'm trying to look through the questions. If anybody had asked a question that I could not maybe have picked up, but I can't see any. So to those that sent us the comments in the comment section, thank you so much. And Mr. Mwila as well, thank you so much for entertaining us. I know it was a bit late and you're very busy, like you said earlier on, that it feels like you're hopping around, but I think that's the beauty of a career at this stage for you. I think it's the movement and the ability to move. So I'm super excited. It has been a pleasure interviewing you, and it has been a pleasure hearing your thoughts. And thank you so much for joining us. To our viewers, thank you so much. For those that sent in stars or comments and have been watching and staying with us, I know this is 21, nearly 22 hours, and you're still awake. So thank you so much. And have a good night and a blessed evening.
Bye-bye.